All right, folks, we're on page 97. 97. The parable of the tares. I got an extra book. She's got one. Anybody else need a book? Now, I contend that this is the most misunderstood parable the Lord taught. And it's one of two that he explained. And both of them that he explained are in Matthew 13. I was called upon in a lectureship at a school of preaching in West Virginia to do the parable of the tares. And a lady walked up to me and said, "Look at this, Wesley. I got it right here in my Bible. What a preacher said. This definitely does not pertain to the kingdom of heaven, the church." But I showed her, in the audience, of course, that could not be the case, and they were thrilled. I presented it at the preacher's meeting. And the first time I tried to present it, they misunderstood it and said it was wrong. The second time, they loved it. They listened. Sometimes you got to listen. Now, notice the theme of the parable is judgment. The main lesson is it is hard to pinpoint some of the unconverted in the kingdom because of their good job of pretense. We have hypocrites. We have those who, quote, obeyed to get the preacher off their back and other reasons, and their wife off their back. But that separation will be made on the last day. You know, someone might say, well, why don't the elders deal with so-and-so? Everybody knows he or she's a hypocrite. Well, now, how are you going to prove that? They're a hypocrite. Even though you may believe it with all your heart. Now, I got this point later in my lesson. But a man and his wife came to my home when I lived up Stoney Creek and said, "Wesley, I want to confess I've been living the life of a hypocrite." And I said to him, "Well, I'll tell you this. You didn't have Elva and me fooled. We believed that for a long time. But now how are you going to bring charges and prove that?" You see, when you start trying to tear them out of the church, you start tearing the church up. Here's a young person that comes forward only because 3 other young people came forward that happened to be their buddies. Their heart wasn't in it, but they went through the right form. Now, what if I tell their mom and dad, I don't believe their heart was in it? I just don't believe they did it for the right reason. You know what I'm going to do? Tear the church up. I'm trying to get rid of the tares, and I'm tearing up the wheat. And that's what this parable is all about. Now notice then, this is a kingdom parable. It falls right in with all the rest of them in Matthew 13, another parable. "Put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field." Well, everybody says that's the church. That's right. Then verse 33, "Another parable spake he unto them, The kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal, till the whole was leavened. Everybody says that's the Lord's church. That's right. Verse 44, again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. Everybody says that's a church. That's true. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchant, man seeking goodly pearls. Everybody says that's a church. That's right. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea and gathered of every kind. They say, well, that's a church. That's right. Then verse 24, again, or another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. They say, well, that's the kingdom. That's the church. That's right. All of those are right. Now, if we're talking about the whole world, notice that the tares look like the children of God. Man, what a mess you've got if we're talking about the whole world rather than the kingdom. You mean to tell me that you've got the Son of Man, Christ, sowing the seed in the kingdom in this parable, and these are legitimate children of God, but they wind up looking like the people in the world? No. It's the tares that's trying to look like the children of God. That's the parable. And where are they? They're in the kingdom. That's where they are. So notice, surely you do not believe the children of Satan out in the world and the children of God look alike. That's not the parable. We're talking about a situation where tares look like wheat. Notice the separation at the end is made from within the kingdom, not the world. Verse 41, the Lord explained it. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and them which do iniquity. So then, we need to realize there's a difference here. We ask the question, why won't preachers and elders and Bible students say, well, now this is definitely the kingdom, the church? Well, I'm convinced I know why. I've had it used against me for those who do not believe the truth. I say, you know, John Doe, Jane Doe are married wrong. And something's got to be done with that situation. And a preacher said to me, can't do it. What do you mean can't do it? We got to love them enough to help save their soul. No, the Lord said, leave the tares there, lest you tear out the wheat also. What? That's the reason some people will not accept this as a kingdom parable. They think that it destroys church discipline. And those who are liberal thinking love it that way. Now, what did we tell you about parables, figurative language in general? You can never interpret a parable or figurative language anytime, anywhere to contradict a clear-cut statement or commandment found somewhere else in God's Word. You cannot do that. That's a wrong approach to hermeneutics. So then, notice a clear-cut statement about church discipline in 2 Thessalonians 3:6. Now we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you withdraw yourselves from every brother that walketh disorderly, and not after the tradition which he received of us. Now that's with things that are discernible. Discernible. Now if I think you're a hypocrite, that's not discernible. I have no right in those realms. I give you the benefit of the doubt. That's the way we're to function as Christians. We're not to go around being professional terror hunters, and some people are. always trying to find fault in somebody's life. Well, we can't do that. And people should then back up and understand at times why elders will not deal with certain situations, because those situations are not as clear cut as they need to be for the elders to take that stand. Man, this helps explain a lot of things. But where it's discernible, we have no choice. We got to take a stand. And if we don't take a stand, we're wrong. In 2 Thessalonians 3:14, and if any man obey not our word by this epistle, note that man, and have no company with him, that he may be ashamed. Romans 16:17. Notice, now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. Now the disciples did not understand the parable, and they wanted him to explain it for them. The Lord pointed out the following facts. Now these are facts. The Lord gave us this information. Number one, he that sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. Number two, the field is the world. That's where you get your converts. The good seed, the children of the kingdom, children of God. The tares, the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed the tares is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. And we're told, and I've already read it for you, that out of his kingdom, the division would be made at the end of time. So look at major point number one, Matthew 13, beginning with verse 24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. Now, in this parable, as the wheat and tares grow, they look just alike until they come to head. See, they cannot be discerned which is which. And for Wesley to start saying, I think that one right there is a tare, and I don't have sufficient proof, I'm tearing the church up. And the Lord told me not to get in that business. And we need to realize that. Here's the Lord's explanation of it in Matthew 13, 37, 38. He answered and said unto them, he that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. Now you think anytime, anywhere, there might be a hypocrite in a local congregation? You think that could be possible? Oh yeah. You think there might be somebody somewhere that went through all the right form in, quote, becoming a child of God, but really did it to get the preacher and his wife off their back rather than from the heart? Oh, yeah. Yeah. What if you suspect that to be the case? You can't prove it. I can't prove it. So you know what God's saying? Leave that to me. I'll take care of it. Don't run a faithful Christian wife off because you're hollering he didn't do it for the right reason, and cause her to lose her faith because you wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt. Give him the benefit of the doubt until you can prove otherwise. Of course, in Matthew 16:13 and in Acts 7:56, Jesus is called the Son of Man. Then in point 3, the field is the world, not the kingdom. Notice that. The field is where the gospel is preached. The kingdom grows out of that. However, among the kingdom, the seed of the evil one is sown. That's where it's sown. The Lord said the enemy came and sowed seed among the wheat. Now it said he did it while people slept. I think that just simply means while you and I went about our business and doing what we ought to be doing. Not negligent, not anything of that nature, but the devil sowed his seed or his people in among God's children. Therefore, the children of the wicked one were sown among the children of the kingdom. Thus the thought of the tares, that which looked like the wheat. Here's a statement from Smith's Bible Dictionary. There can be little doubt that the zizania of the parable of Matthew 13:25 denotes the weed called darnel. The darnel, before it comes to ear, is very similar in appearance to wheat. Hence the command that zizania should be left to the harvest, lest men pluck up the tares. They should root up also with them, the wheat with them. So it's noticed, hey, here's something that looks just like the wheat, growing until it comes to head. And then the difference can be told. Now, the Lord is showing a difference here for the purpose of the parable, that he can see the difference. The angel can see the difference. But you and I, we can't discern that. In Strong's Numbers 22:15, zizanian, it's translated 8 times in the King James Version, and every time tares. It's a kind of darnel resembling wheat, except the grains are black. Looks like wheat. Therefore, the tares look like God's people. These are the unconverted sown among the local congregation in the kingdom. And it could be some of the converted that later become hypocrites. They claim to be citizens in the kingdom, but they have never from the heart obeyed God. Here are some examples. One I mentioned a moment ago. A person obeys the gospel because it will get his wife off his back. I had a lady tell me, it used to be a member here, I only did it to get so-and-so off my back. I never was convinced that the Church of Christ was God's people. My. But you know, we had to treat her as if though she was a faithful member of the church. But she was a terror. We didn't know it until she confessed it. A person who is married wrong declares that he is married right and thus obeys the gospel. Here's somebody that's married wrong, and they come to this congregation and they want to place membership, and the elders meet with them and they swear up and down, yes, we've been married before, but we put our mates away for the cause of fornication, and they're from Oregon, and we call and try to find out what we can there. Oh yeah, yep, they said they put their mate away for the cause of fornication. And we fellowship them thinking they're telling the truth, when in reality they didn't do that. Well, guess what they are among this congregation? They're tares. But we got to treat them as faithful children of God. Got to take care of that. A young person comes forward with all his friends to, quote, obey the gospel, but his heart's not in it. Well, we got to, what if we told his mom and dad, he wasn't sincere? We're not going to accept him. What do you think mom and dad would do and all their friends? They'd leave here for sure and maybe leave the church. Depending on how strong their faith might be, a man becomes a member of the church because he wants to push an agenda. Well, the Church of Christ is the biggest religious group in this town, and I'm starting a business, so that's where I'm going, and I'm going to do whatever they say you got to do to be a child of God. Well, he does it, and we think he's sincere. Well, we got to fellowship him because we're giving him the benefit of the doubt. That's what God tells us to do. So we have no choice in the matter. How many times have you heard a member of the church asked relative to another member or make the statement, he's never been converted? I've had people say, Wesley, that person has never been converted. How are you going to prove that? I mean, he makes bad decisions, yes. Unless he gets involved in open sin, how are you going to prove something like that? And then, how many times have you heard somebody say, you know, when I obeyed the gospel, I didn't have a clue, really, what I was doing. And I want to make it right. I want to make sure that I now understand and want to become a child of God for the right reasons. I baptized quite a few that way. But before I baptized them, guess what we did? We treated them as a faithful member of the church because we couldn't discern otherwise. These are not like the man in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 who took his father's wife. That is discernible. It's not like somebody that gets drunk who's a member of the church here, brings reproach upon the body of Christ. That's discernible. It's not like somebody gets caught fornicating who's a member of the church here. That's discernible. All matters that are discernible we're to deal with. Those that are not discernible have to be left up to God. They don't get by with it. I think sometimes we got the attitude, well, if we don't do something about it, they're going to get by with it. They're not going to get by with it. If we fellowship them until the day they die, they didn't get by with it. They're caught by the only one that matters. Now, before I go to major point number 2, questions, comments, observations. All right.
Some will take this to the extreme and say that we have the responsibility of keeping the church pure. Right, so we have to make sure that we're removing all those that look like tares. But that goes to exactly the point you've been making. That is our responsibility concerning that which is discernible.
That's right.
If we blatantly ignore open sin, then we are not keeping the church pure.
That's right.
But if we have no clue about sin, then how can we be held responsible for the purity of the church?
That's right.
When we can't do anything.
See, that's like me saying, I don't think Chris is a sincere Christian. I really don't. How am I going to establish that? Now look at the trouble I'm causing in this congregation. It's going to cause a tremendous uproar.
How many times has the church been hurt because people made judgments they couldn't really make? This parable takes the burden off the elders, the leadership, in making decisions they're not qualified and can't make.
That's exactly right.
There's two sides to every story, and people can see something going on, think this is it, and the elders got to do something about it.
Yeah.
You go visit and find the opposite is true, or at least it appears that way. And so we can't make those discernments of the heart, only God can.
When I was preaching for White Oak, a young girl was going to get married. And her aunt called me to her house and said, Wesley, if the elders down there don't take a stand on this, I am leaving. And this was her niece. And I said, all right, Marie, I promise you we'll take a stand if we have the evidence. Now, apparently you got it. Now, you give me the evidence, I'll take it to the elders. And I promise you they'll check it out. they don't, I will. And she looked at me and said, you know, I guess I don't have any evidence. I said, well, why are you that strong about this if you don't have any evidence? She said, you're right. And she gave it up. She finally realized it was not discernible by her. David, were you going to raise your hand?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of people get hung up on the judge not lest you be judged, but we're also to use righteous judgment.
That's right.
Judgment, we discern what is opposed to us versus what we think. And when we act on what we think versus what we really know, that's not righteous judgment.
That's exactly right. See, we're to be in the judging business, but like David said, only to the point that we can discern right and wrong and do it righteously. We have no business being in the judging business when I'm trying to judge your motive, trying to judge your heart, why you did a thing. I'm not qualified to be in that realm. And God here is telling us we're not qualified to be in that realm. Leave it alone. I'll take care of it. You're going to destroy people if you try to take care of it. All right, anything else before we move on?
Hey, Wesley, I knew a preacher that misunderstood this parable, and he believed that you couldn't discipline nobody. Just let them grow together in the church no matter what they did.
Maybe the same preacher I butted heads with and went round and around with him. And he brought it up even in a preacher's meeting. I happened to be in control of it that day. And he suggested if people were married wrong, leave them alone because of the parable of the tares and because of their children. I said, so you're saying let them go to hell and be a bad example to their children, and the parable of the tares does not teach what you're trying to get it to teach. You're trying to get it to eliminate clear-cut passages, other places on church discipline, and we cannot use a parable that way. So, and of course, all the preachers there stood against him, and he is totally wrong. We cannot use figurative language or a parable to go against clear-cut teachings found anywhere else in the New Testament. So don't forget that. That's just a clear hermeneutical rule. You don't do that. All right, anything else? Major point number 2. So the servants of the household came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in the field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? Now notice the explanation in Matthew 13:39. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. And he's going to tell them a little later, leave them alone. For the sake of the parable, a distinction has to be made. Otherwise, we do not have a parable. See, the Lord has got to show there's a difference in the two. He can get it. He can send the angels to separate them, but you and I can't get it. We don't have the ability. The point is the tares look so much like the wheat, it would be hard to get rid of the tares without destroying the wheat. We cannot judge some situations. Like David said a moment ago, we do not know people's hearts. We cannot judge their motives. We cannot know some situations relative to marriage, divorce, and remarriage. The elders here in many cases would have loved to have known exactly what took place, because some people will not tell you the truth. And here's that verse David used, John 7:24, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Now that does not mean, as some would try to say from Matthew 7, we're not in the judging business. We are. But we got to do it according to our abilities and according to truth and according to righteousness. And there's some areas wherein you and I are not qualified to judge. I'm not qualified to judge your heart and your motives. I just don't have that ability. Now, God does. God expects us to give our fellow man the benefit of the doubt. When a man declares himself to be a faithful member of the Lord's church and acting in harmony with God's laws, as far as I can tell, all I can do is fellowship him. If he is a hypocrite and lying about his relationship with God, this will be taken care of in the judgment. Now watch this. There are those in the kingdom based on conviction and conversion. I trust that's all of you. There are those who are fellowship because of their claim. They claim to be a member of the church. Oh, I may have my doubts about them, but I still got to fellowship them. I cannot see anything that I can prove that they're doing that's unscriptural. And to be a faithful Christian, I've got to do what God wants me to do. I think that sometimes we believe that if we do not mark these individuals in this life, then they will have gotten by with their ungodliness. Those who fool us, God has identified. Don't you worry about it. God's got them identified. Now watch this. Boy, here's a verse. Some men's sins are open beforehand, going before to judgment, and some men they follow after. That's simply to say, some people are so ungodly when they die, you know they're rotten, ungodly people. But some, their sins follow after them. When I was at the Memphis School of Preaching, the story was told of an elder who spent about 50% of his time in this town, and say 500 miles away, 50% in this town. He worked for a company, back and forth, flying back and forth. The plane crashed, killed him. And boy, were they surprised when two wives came to identify the body. He had a family in each town. Over here where he was an elder, they deemed him to be a righteous, godly man. They didn't know. And they did the right thing by fellowshipping him, but God knew all the time. And the church did not find out until two wives came to identify the body. But God had him caught. But he had both places fooled. Isn't that amazing? See, we can't fool God. No way in the world we can do that. So his sins followed after him, so to speak. Of course, they became open beforehand when the wives came. In 1 John 2:19, they went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us. But they went out, that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us. They weren't sold on the truth that we proclaimed, the one church. They were not sold on Jesus Christ being the Son of God and dying for the sins of the world. They were not willing to fight the good fight of faith as they should have, or they'd have stayed with us. You know, sometimes persecution separates those who really don't have their heart in it from those who do. Persecution's not all bad. Major point number 3. But he said, nay, lest ye gather up the tares, or while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. How long? Until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into the barn, into my barn. So then he explains what he means by that in verses 40 through 42. And therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire. So shall it be in the end of the world. That's the harvest. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of the kingdom all things that offend, and them who do iniquity. Notice, gather out of the kingdom those that offend and those that do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So he says, don't you try to get them out. You let me handle that. At the end of time, I'll take care of it. I promise you. And so the Lord takes care of it. The lookalikes, point number 4, did not get by with it. It's not good enough to look like a Christian. One must be a Christian from the heart. Notice in Matthew 15:8, this parable, or the people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Now, while it's true that some of those people that honored the Lord with their mouth and their heart was far from him, those good, faithful Jews that loved the Lord would have fellowshiped some of those people, thinking they were sincere. Well, God's not going to hold that against them because the Lord knows that they couldn't read their heart. See, I can't read your heart. And I'm not in that business. Now let me jump down right fast to ask the question, where's the rapture, the 1,000-year reign, and all this stuff? Why are you asking that, Wesley? Because God forbid that you own a Scofield Bible. I used to own one. I got one in my office. A Scofield Bible has footnotes at the end of it that teaches the premillennial doctrine. And it says that first, look at the middle of Scofield's quote regarding verse 30, which says, gather ye together first the tares. That's what the Bible says. He says at the end of this age, verse 40, the tares are set apart for burning, but first the wheat is gathered into the barn. You know why he's got to change which one's first? Because of the rapture. You got to get the wheat out of here first. He had to change what came first. And, of course, he's wrong in doing that. In any footnote, be careful, but especially in a Scofield Bible. Then, of course, he says the righteous will shine forth. And, of course, there's verses to show that the righteous are known by the Lord and they're going to be rewarded. Now, lessons we can learn from the parable. We all fall into one category or the other. We have been converted out of a good heart by good seed, or else we are children of the wicked one. We're obligated to keep the church pure, but we're not obligated beyond our abilities to discern. When the evidence is in, we must take a stand. Number 3, there are some things that we must leave to the Lord. And a lot of people don't want to do that, but we got to do it. I do not have to sit in judgment on all cases because I cannot know some things. There will always be hypocrites in the church. Hypocrisy is real. I cannot judge a man's heart. I cannot judge a man's motives. God will take care of the tares. We cannot judge every situation. If I try to rip out the tares, I will destroy some of the wheat, and I will have to answer to God for that. We're to give our fellow man the benefit of the doubt. One can become a professional tare hunter, and I think I know some of them. The devil will have his disciples claiming to be in the kingdom. Can you think of a greater thing that the devil can do than to put his own people in the local congregation to try to destroy it? I mean, he's not an idiot totally. He is, but not totally. Some of Satan's people can be hard to identify because they say, I am this or that, when in reality, they're not this or that. You can fool me, but you cannot fool God. A man will reap what he sows. The righteous will be rewarded. Obedience is a must and not an option. We must obey from the heart. We're not to interpret any parable to contradict a clear-cut doctrine such as church discipline. It takes the sowing of the seed to produce Christians. We must be careful not to make rash judgments. Sin in the church is the work of Satan. Satan is trying to destroy the church. We must be careful not to cause others to stumble. The church will never be free from sin while on earth. Questions or comments before we quit? Thank you much for your kind attention.